we ended up starting the label Def Jam, and I was the first artist. Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin started the label, and I was the flagship artist.
You might know the story of LL Cool J and Def Jam, how he became the label's very first superstar and the man who put it on the map. But what you might not know is the real reason behind the tension that once brewed inside the label, and why LL later admitted that the very place he helped build once felt like a prison. From the secret equity he sold too soon, to a bitter clash with Jay-Z that nearly destroyed his legacy, this is the untold story LL Cool J kept quiet for decades. But to understand better what LL has to say, we have to go back to the mid-1980s in New York City, when hip-hop was still considered a fad by major record labels. DJs were spinning in parks, breakdancers were flipping on cardboard, and young MCs were fighting to prove the world wrong. Enter James Todd Smith, just 16 years old, a Queens kid with nothing but a demo tape and a dream. He started calling Def Jam's phone number every single day until Rick Rubin finally picked up. At the time, Def Jam wasn't even a real label yet, it was just a scrappy production company run out of Rubin's dorm room at NYU. LL mailed in his tape, Rubin pressed play, and hip-hop changed forever. His first single, I Need a Beat, sold over 100 copies. That kind of success in the early 80s? Practically unheard of for rap. It was proof that hip-hop wasn't just street culture, it could be big business. By 1985, LL Cool J released Radio, the first official Def Jam album. Minimalist beats, booming drum machines, and LL's in-your-face confidence created something brand new. Radio sold 500,000 copies in 5 months. By 1989, it went platinum. Critics called it a seismic shift. Fans called LL the new king. Def Jam, built by Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons, now had its first superstar, and soon they'd have an empire. But even then, LL admits he was thinking bigger than just rapping. Here's where the story takes a surprising turn. When most rappers in the 1980s were just happy to land a single record deal, LL Cool J signed one of the boldest contracts of that era, a 10-album deal with Def Jam. That deal would eventually produce classics like Radio, Mama Said Knock You Out, and 10, cementing him as one of the most important voices in hip-hop. But hidden behind the music was something even more extraordinary. LL wasn't just an artist, he was also part owner. He held equity in Def Jam itself. Think about how rare that was. In the mid-80s, rappers weren't being offered publishing rights, let alone ownership stakes. Most artists signed away their futures for a quick advance. LL, however, managed to get a literal piece of the company that would grow into one of the most iconic labels in music history. But then came the twist that still haunts the story. Years later, LL admitted, I did have equity in Def Jam. I just sold it a little early. That one decision changed everything. Because not long after, Def Jam became part of the Universal Music Empire, a company now worth billions. Had LL held onto his equity, he could have sat alongside the wealthiest moguls in hip-hop, not just as an entertainer, but as one of the true power players of the industry. It's become one of hip-hop's great what-if stories. Imagine if LL Cool J had remained a shareholder as Def Jam grew into a global powerhouse. He might have rivaled the fortunes of moguls like Jay-Z or Dr. Dre. Instead, LL redirected his energy into other ventures. He became an early supporter of FUBU, took ownership in Lip Sync Battle, and of course, built a steady fortune through his long-running acting career on NCIS Los Angeles. But here's what makes LL unique. While he may have sold his Def Jam stake too soon, he did something that most of his peers failed to do. He kept control of his music. For over 2 decades, LL Cool J has owned his masters. That means every time Mama Said Knock You Out blasts in a commercial or Rock the Bells drops in a movie, that licensing money doesn't go to a label. It goes directly into LL's pocket. So yes, he might have given away his shot at being hip-hop's first billionaire. But by securing his catalog, he guaranteed something just as powerful: independence and the ability to profit from his legacy forever. Despite missing out on the fortune of his early equity, LL Cool J's role in Def Jam's history is untouchable. Even Def Jam's current CEO, Tunji Balagun, put it plainly. LL is the D in Def Jam, and when you look back, it's hard to argue. It was LL's runaway success that gave Def Jam credibility. When the Beastie Boys signed in 1985, they admitted they felt comfortable because LL had already proven the label could create stars. Public Enemy came in the following year, bringing political fire and cultural weight. Slick Rick followed, adding his unique brand of storytelling. Together, these signings transformed Def Jam from a scrappy experiment in a dorm room into the epicenter of hip-hop's golden age. At the center of it all was LL Cool J. Over 2 decades, he sold more than 20 million albums through Def Jam, earned 7 platinum certifications, 2 Grammys, and 9 Grammy nominations. His hits weren't just radio singles, they were cultural moments. Rock the Bells became an anthem for hip-hop purists. Around the Way Girl showed rap could balance toughness with tenderness. Going Back to Cali proved rap could travel beyond the streets of New York and still feel authentic. And even when rivals came for him from Kool Moe Dee in the 80s to Cannabis in the late 90s, LL held a rare position. He could beef like a battle rapper, but he could also dominate MTV, land film roles, and stay on magazine covers. He was living proof that a rapper could be lyrical, tough, commercial, and mainstream all at once. But here's the irony. LL's pride in being that foundation and seeing himself as the bones of Def Jam would later fuel one of the most heated debates in hip-hop. Who truly deserves a spot on the label's Mount Rushmore? Fast forward to 2024, LL Cool J appears on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast, and the conversation takes a sharp turn when Sharp asks a simple but loaded question: who's on the Mount Rushmore of Def Jam? LL doesn't hesitate. He names himself, the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, and Slick Rick. And with that one answer, the internet exploded. The backlash was instant. How could LL leave out Jay-Z, one of the biggest selling rappers in Def Jam history? How could he ignore DMX, who brought the label roaring back to life in the late 90s? What about Ludacris, who ruled the early 2000s? Or Rihanna, who became one of the most successful pop stars of all time under Def Jam? Fans accused LL of being petty, of rewriting history to make himself look bigger. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and Twitter threads called his picks the most disrespectful list in hip-hop history. But LL didn't flinch. Days later, on The Breakfast Club, he doubled down with a line that instantly went viral. "I gave them the bones of the label. They want to talk about cosmetics, but if you don't have no bones, you gonna be a pile of flesh over there on the floor." In other words, LL wasn't measuring fame or sales. He was talking about foundation. His argument was that without those 4 names, LL himself, the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, and Slick Rick, there would be no Def Jam at all for Jay-Z, DMX, Rihanna, or Ludacris to stand on. And if you look at the timeline, he has a point. LL signed in 1984, becoming Def Jam's first superstar. The Beastie Boys' 1986 debut proved rap could cross into the mainstream. Public Enemy brought politics and power in 87, while Slick Rick added storytelling finesse in 88. Together, they didn't just make hits, they built the label's DNA. But here's the catch. His logic clashed with modern fan expectations. Younger audiences saw Jay-Z, Rihanna, and DMX as the ones who took Def Jam global. To them, LL's list felt outdated, even bitter, and that sparked days of heated debates online. A top comment on Reddit's Hip-Hop Heads summed up the pro-LL side perfectly. I can agree with LL on this one because they were the pioneers of the label, but the other side was ruthless. Not having Hov on a Def Jam list is blasphemous. The divide revealed something deeper than just a list. It was about generations clashing. To LL, the foundation matters more than fame. To younger fans, the stars who broke records and sold out stadiums matter more than the pioneers who laid the groundwork. And that tension between legacy and modern success is exactly where the real drama begins. When Jay-Z took over as president of Def Jam in 2004, it looked like a dream scenario on paper. The old guard and the new king under one roof, LL Cool J, the pioneer who built the house, and Jay-Z, the megastar poised to run it. For fans, it felt like hip-hop royalty was finally uniting, but behind the scenes, things couldn't have been more tense. LL Cool J began to feel neglected, even betrayed. By 2006, he was openly voicing his frustration. In his Behind the Music special on VHONE, LL didn't sugarcoat it. That hurt, that was painful, and that created a lot of bruised in my spirit. According to LL, Jay simply wasn't doing the job of a label president. He wasn't picking up phones, wasn't calling radio stations, wasn't pushing LL's music. Instead, the spotlight was falling on a new wave of Def Jam stars Rihanna, Ne-Yo, and others who were dominating the mid-2000s charts. For LL, who had been the backbone of Def Jam since the 80s, it felt like erasure. He even went as far as describing Def Jam during Jay's presidency as a prison. That word carried weight. It showed just how suffocating the label felt to someone who had once been its face. The situation grew so heated that even outsiders stepped in. 50 Cent, at the height of his own fame, tried to mediate. He told MTV, He feels that they're not prioritizing him. He's been there from the start. I talked to him and I talked to Jay. I'm the liaison between them. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating in the industry that LL and Jay-Z were preparing to take things to wax, that diss tracks were on the horizon. The thought of two titans, one representing the foundation and the other the future, trading shots sent shockwaves through hip-hop circles. But Jay cut the speculation short. He told MTV, "He's a legend. I'm not doing that. If you want to work it out, I'm more than willing." In the end, there was no diss track, no public showdown, but there was no reconciliation either. By 2008, LL had had enough. He released his final Def Jam project, Exit 13, and walked away after 2 decades with the label. Still, the bitterness lingered. For many fans, the clash between LL Cool J and Jay-Z wasn't just a business dispute, it was symbolic. It represented the generational handoff of Def Jam itself, from the pioneer who laid the bricks to the mogul who reshaped the empire. And yet, the drama didn't end there. Because in hip-hop's underground whispers, one story kept resurfacing, a rumored battle that supposedly left LL embarrassed and Jay-Z victorious. Whether fact or myth, it added another layer to the tension. For years, whispers floated around hip-hop circles about a night in Manhattan when two giants supposedly clashed, LL Cool J and Jay-Z. According to the rumor, the two traded bars in a club, and LL, out of material, recycled a verse from his 1993-track Funkadelic Relic. The story goes that the crowd laughed, Jay-Z walked away with the win, and LL Cool J, the man who once embodied Def Jam itself, walked away humiliated. The tale spread like wildfire, becoming part of hip-hop folklore. You could hear it in barbershops, on message boards, and even in interviews with industry insiders. But as with most hip-hop legends, the details kept shifting depending on who told the story. What did happen is, I see Jay in the club trying to flash money. Sauce Money comes up, raps, I spit a couple rhymes. I was albums in at that point. I ran out of rhymes. That's all it was. But let me tell you, if I was fully loaded, I'm not the rapper you want to get into that with. So what really happened? LL admitted he ran out of verses, not exactly a strong look in a live cypher. But did Jay-Z embarrass him? Not quite. According to LL, it wasn't a formal battle at all. Just a brief, unexpected exchange in the middle of a crowded club. Still, once the story hit the streets, the narrative took on a life of its own. And that's the danger in hip-hop. Perception often matters more than fact. Big L's legendary street battles, the endless Tupac versus Biggie stories myth-making is as much a part of the culture as the music itself. Even today, fans are divided. Some argue Jay caught LL slipping, using it as proof of a generational shift, the old guard falling to the new. Others insist LL was too seasoned, too sharp, to ever be beaten in a real head-to-head. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But one thing is undeniable. Whether it happened exactly as the rumors claimed or not, the story added fuel to the fire. It painted LL as vulnerable at the very moment Jay-Z's power was rising inside Def Jam. And perception alone was enough to make it sting. For LL Cool J, the myth symbolized something larger. The shift from the era he built to the one he no longer controlled. The label he once called home was slipping away, and soon he would walk away from Def Jam entirely, beginning a decade-long silence nobody expected from the man who once defined its sound. By 2008, the unthinkable happened. LL Cool J, the man who put Def Jam on the map, the man who sold millions under their banner, walked away from the label he helped create. His final project, Exit 13, was more than just an album title. It was a symbolic goodbye. But LL didn't leave quietly. He described his time at the label under Jay-Z's presidency as a prison. That's a word that shook fans. Here was LL, the face of Def Jam for 2 decades, saying the place that made him a star now felt like a cage. He admitted it bruised his spirit and he needed to breathe. This wasn't just about music, it was about identity. For 20 years, LL Cool J and Def Jam were one and the same. To walk away felt like leaving behind a piece of himself, but at the same time, he was tired of fighting for respect inside his own house. And so, he left. But this departure sparked questions. Was LL simply a victim of bad leadership under Jay-Z? Or had Def Jam outgrown him? Fans speculated endlessly. Some said the industry had moved on to a new generation, Kanye West, Lil Wayne, and eventually Drake. Others argued that LL was unfairly sidelined in favor of trendier acts. Either way, LL stepped away from the booth and into a silence that would last longer than anyone expected. LL Cool J didn't disappear completely far from it. Instead, he reinvented himself. He became a TV star, playing Special Agent Sam Hanna on NCIS, Los Angeles for 14 seasons. He hosted Lip Sync Battle, which ran for 5 seasons and turned into a viral sensation. He even launched Rock the Bells Radio on SiriusXM, giving a platform to old-school hip-hop legends who were often overlooked. But musically, LL went silent. His last studio album, Authentic, 2013, barely made a dent. After that, nothing. For 10 years, the man who once shouted, "Don't call it a comeback," seemed to have no comeback in sight. Fans wondered, had LL Cool J retired without saying it? Was he waiting for the right moment? Or was the pain of his Def Jam fallout too much to overcome? Industry insiders speculated that LL might have felt boxed in. Rap had changed dramatically. Trap beats, auto-tune, mumble rap. Where did a 50-something legend fit into a landscape dominated by artists half his age? Still, one thing about LL Cool J has always been true. He doesn't stay down for long. In 2019, whispers started circulating. Industry insiders claimed LL was back in the studio, maybe even back with Def Jam. Nothing concrete, but the rumors were enough to spark a fire online. A Reddit thread in r, old school hip-hop at the time, summed it up. LL returning to Def Jam feels like Jordan going back to the Bulls. And it wasn't just empty speculation. Def Jam sources hinted that LL's homecoming could be real. The timing was perfect too. Hip-hop was approaching its 50th anniversary. What better moment for one of its original giants to return? But LL stayed quiet. No confirmation, no denial. Just silence. Until 2024, 40 years after radio changed hip-hop, LL Cool J dropped The Force, his first studio album in over a decade. And this wasn't just nostalgia, this was a statement. Produced entirely by Q-Tip of A Tribe Called Quest, the album fused innovation with tradition. LL described working with Q-Tip as a joy, calling him a brilliant dude. And the features? Stacked. Eminem, Nas, Snoop Dogg, Busta Rhymes, Rick Ross, Fat Joe, Saweetie. Even his old friend Busta Rhymes introduced him at the MTV VMAs that year, calling LL a true trailblazer, my hero. At the VMAs, LL performed a medley of classics Rock the Bells, Mama Said Knock You Out, Around the Way Girl, before transitioning into tracks from The Force. Fans held up pictures of goats, a nod to LL coining the phrase greatest of all time with his 2000 album GOAT. And the crowd? They went insane. Def Jam's chairman Tunji Balagun put it perfectly. The saying around here is that LL is the D in Def Jam. He sparked the success. But LL's comeback wasn't about ego, it was about culture. He told Talk Shop Live, "I didn't want to cheat the fans. I wanted them to have a real LL Cool J album. This project is more about the people and cultural impact than anything else." At 56 years old, LL was proving something bigger, that hip-hop legends don't have to fade away. They can evolve. The reactions were divided, but in the best way. Some fans were emotional, praising LL for coming full circle. Others compared his return to Jay-Z's 444, calling both projects proof that rap can age gracefully. But of course, some critics said LL was chasing the past, relying too heavily on old formulas and famous features. The debate mirrored his Mount Rushmore controversy. Was LL stuck in nostalgia, or was he simply honoring the foundation he helped build? Industry peers, though, were clear. Eminem, Nas, and Snoop all praised him publicly. For them, LL wasn't competing with younger rappers, he was cementing his status as a pioneer who still had something left in the tank. So what do we make of LL Cool J finally opening up about Def Jam? It's a story of contrasts. On one hand, he was the kid who wouldn't stop calling until someone listened, and that persistence launched one of the greatest labels in music history. He had equity, he had ownership, he had vision long before it was trendy. On the other hand, he also sold too early, clashed with Jay-Z, and walked away from the label he once called home. He admitted the pain, the betrayal, the feeling of being locked in a prison. But then, he came back. 4 decades after radio, LL Cool J has reunited with Def Jam, dropped The Force, and reminded the world why he coined the term GOAT in the first place. The full circle journey is undeniable. From the dorm room to the boardroom, from platinum plaques to primetime TV, from painful exile to triumphant return. And maybe that's the real takeaway. LL Cool J isn't just part of Def Jam's history, he is Def Jam's history. But here's the bigger question. Was LL right all along? Should Def Jam's Mount Rushmore be about pioneers like LL, Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, and Slick Rick? Or should it include megastars like Jay-Z, Rihanna, and DMX, who took the label global? And if LL hadn't sold his equity early, would he be sitting at the top of hip-hop's billionaire list today? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story isn't over. If LL's comeback proves anything, it's that the past still has unfinished business.